There are times in life that arrive quietly, disguised as ordinary favors, simple requests from friends that seem inconsequential at the time. You say yes without thinking too deeply, without understanding that you're standing at a threshold, about to step through a door that will fundamentally alter how you see yourself. This is the story of one such moment, a church favor that became so much more than I ever anticipated, a single afternoon that cracked open something inside me I didn't even know existed. My name is Charles, and this is the story of the very first day I experienced my inner feminine side. It was bitter and sweet all at once, frightening and exhilarating, uncomfortable and strangely, surprisingly right. This is the story of how a simple church function, a nun's habit, and the courage to help a friend became the catalyst for a personal discovery that would resonate through every day that followed. To understand this story, you need to understand the friendship that made it possible. Nancy Turner and I have been inseparable since grade 1. We grew up in the same community, our houses just a block apart, close enough that we could bike to each other's homes without our parents worrying. We attended the same schools, played in the same parks, and went to the same church every Sunday. Nancy and I are both 17. Turner is our elder statesman at 19. He graduated high school the year before Nancy and I started our senior year, and there's something about those extra 2 years that actually does make a difference. We look up to him, rely on his judgment, trust his perspective when we're trying to navigate complicated situations. This friendship, this deep, abiding connection between the three of us, is the foundation of everything that happened next. Because what I'm about to tell you required trust. The kind of trust that only comes from years of proving yourself to the people you love. Our church was planning something special, a historical reenactment service that would take place during the upcoming Sunday celebration. The idea was to honor the founding mothers of our congregation, the group of nuns who had established our church community back in the early 1900s. It was going to be this elaborate production with period-appropriate costumes, readings from historical texts, hymns sung in the traditional style. The church leadership was taking it seriously, putting together a team of participants who would dress as nuns and take part in a ceremonial procession. When the announcement went out asking for volunteers, Nancy's hand shot up immediately. This was exactly the kind of thing she loved, an opportunity to be involved in something meaningful, something that would put her at the center of church community life. The selection process involved an initial meeting where participants would be fitted for their habits, receive instructions about the ceremony, and go through a rehearsal of the procession. It was scheduled for a Wednesday evening, just 2 days away. Nancy marked it on her calendar, set multiple reminders on her phone, talked about it constantly. She'd been chosen, selected from among several volunteers, and she wasn't going to let anything interfere with this opportunity. Turner and I were genuinely happy for her. We knew how much church involvement meant to Nancy, how she found purpose and community in these activities. We congratulated her, listened to her excitement, shared in her anticipation. Neither of us had any interest in participating ourselves. Turner had work commitments, and I had never been much for performing in front of crowds. But we were thrilled that Nancy had found another way to shine, another platform to express the vibrant spirit that made her who she was. Those 2 days before the meeting passed normally enough. School, homework, the usual routine of teenage life. None of us could have predicted what was about to happen. None of us saw the crisis coming that would turn a simple church function into the catalyst for my most profound personal discovery. It was Wednesday afternoon, and Turner and I were at my place having some quality guys time. My parents were both at work, so we had the house to ourselves, which meant we could game without anyone telling us to turn down the volume or take a break. We were deep into an intense session of our favorite multiplayer game, controllers in hand, completely absorbed in the virtual world on the screen. The competition between us was fierce but friendly. We were talking each other good-naturedly, laughing at our mistakes, celebrating our wins. Completely immersed in this bubble of teenage male bonding. That's when we heard it. A loud, frantic knock on the door. Not the polite knock of a neighbor or delivery person, but an urgent, desperate pounding that immediately cut through our concentration. Both Turner and I froze, controllers still in our hands, and turned to look at the door with a mixture of surprise and concern. Before either of us could move to answer it, the door burst open. Nancy rushed in, and I could immediately tell something was seriously wrong. Her face was pale, her expression panicked, her whole body radiating distress. She was clutching a small bag to her chest, and even from across the room, I could see she was on the verge of tears. This wasn't the confident, enthusiastic Nancy we knew. This was someone facing an issue, desperately seeking help. "Charles, I really need you to save my day," she said, her voice breaking slightly on the words. Turner and I exchanged glances, immediately setting down our controllers and giving her our full attention. Nancy wasn't prone to dramatics. If she said she needed help, she genuinely needed help. We waited, both of us leaning forward, ready to do whatever we could. The story came tumbling out of her in a rush of words. She'd woken up that morning with severe stomach problems, the kind that had kept her close to the bathroom all day. She'd tried to push through it, hoping it would pass, convinced that she could still make the participant meeting that evening. But as the afternoon wore on, it had only gotten worse. She felt weak, nauseated, completely unprepared to leave her house, let alone attend a meeting where she'd need to be fitted for a costume and participate in a rehearsal. But here was the problem. The church had made it clear that attendance at this initial meeting was mandatory. Anyone who missed it would automatically be disqualified from participating in the actual ceremony. There were alternates waiting, people who would be happy to step into any vacant spots. If Nancy didn't show up, she'd lose this opportunity she'd been so excited about. "I can't miss this meeting," she said, her voice desperate. "I just can't. This means too much to me." I still didn't understand what she was asking, didn't see where Turner and I fit into this situation. I whispered, feeling uncertain. "So how can I be of help?" That's when Nancy opened the small bag she'd been clutching. Inside was a folded black garment and a pair of simple black heels. She pulled them out slightly, just enough for us to see, and then looked directly at me with an expression that was part hope, part desperation, part apology. "I need you to put on this dress and go in place of me," she said quickly, as if saying it fast would make it less shocking. "You don't have to say a word. The meeting is mostly just getting fitted, receiving instructions, going through a quick rehearsal. I just need someone to show up, to secure my slot for the actual function. Please, Charles, I'm begging you." The room went completely silent. I stared at her, certain I must have misheard. Put on a dress? Go to a church meeting? Dressed as a nun? Pretend to be Nancy? The whole idea was so absurd that my first instinct was to laugh. I actually started to, a nervous chuckle escaping my lips. Because surely this had to be some kind of joke. But Nancy's expression stopped me cold. She wasn't laughing. She wasn't smiling. She was dead serious, looking at me with eyes that pleaded for understanding, for help, for the kind of favor that true friends provide when everything is on the line. "Nancy, this is crazy," I started to say. "There's no way I could." That's when Turner interrupted, his voice calm and thoughtful as always. "Actually, Charles, think about it. You and Nancy are basically the same height. You've got a similar build, similar stature. With the habit covering most of your features, with the veil and the coif, no one would really see your face clearly, and she's right that you wouldn't have to talk. These meetings are usually pretty structured. You just stand there, get measured, nod when appropriate." I turned to look at Turner, shocked that he was actually considering this seriously. But he wasn't joking either. He was looking at me with that steady, analytical expression he got when he was working through a problem, weighing the possibilities. Nancy's face had already started to fall, hope draining from her expression as she prepared herself for rejection. She looked defeated, lost, like someone watching their dreams slip away. And in that moment, something shifted inside me. This was my friend, one of my best friends in the world, someone who had been there for me countless times over the years. She was asking for help, genuinely desperate, and I had the power to give her what she needed. "Okay." I heard myself say, every instinct in me screaming no, the word leaving my mouth before I'd fully thought through what I was agreeing to. "Okay, I'll do it. For friendship. For helping a friend when it matters most." The relief that washed over Nancy's face was immediate and overwhelming. She was actually full of gratitude, then threw her arms around me in a fierce hug. Turner clapped me on the shoulder, a gesture of respect for making a hard decision, for stepping up when it counted. Little did I know, in that moment of saying yes, I was about to write a history that would stick with me for the rest of my life. I thought I was just helping a friend, doing a favor, playing a role for a few hours. I had no idea I was about to discover something profound about myself, about the person I could be, about aspects of my identity I'd never explored or even acknowledged. Nancy moved with surprising efficiency once I'd agreed, clearly having thought through exactly how this would work. She'd brought everything we might need, her bag producing item after item like some kind of magical Mary Poppins satchel. The nun's habit, the heels, and then, to my surprise, a small makeup kit. "We need to do this right," she explained, already directing me toward my bathroom. "Your skin is clearer than mine, which actually helps. But we need to soften your features just a bit, make sure you look the part if anyone happens to see your face up close." Turner positioned himself as our lookout and assistant, standing by to offer opinions and make sure we had everything we needed. There was something surreal about the whole situation, the three of us crammed into my bathroom, embarking on this completely unexpected mission. Nancy started with my face. She had me sit on the edge of the bathtub while she examined my features with the critical eye of an artist approaching a canvas. The makeup she'd brought was subtle, natural, Exactly what you'd expect a nun to wear if she wore any makeup at all. First came a light foundation, just enough to even out my skin tone and create a smooth, clean complexion. She used a light powder next, setting the foundation and creating a matte finish that looked natural and authentic. Then came the smallest touch of blush, applied so subtly I could barely see it in the mirror. For my eyes, she kept everything minimal. The lips were the final touch, and here too she went for absolute subtlety. The goal, she explained, was to look healthy and natural, like someone who took basic care of themselves but wasn't trying to enhance their appearance. When she stepped back to examine her work, I caught a glimpse of myself in the mirror and felt a strange flutter in my chest. My face looked different, softer somehow, but still recognizably me. The changes were so subtle that if you weren't looking closely, you might not even notice the makeup. But it had transformed something, created a gentleness in my features I'd never seen before. "Okay," Nancy said, satisfied with the makeup. "Now for the habit." The nun's habit she'd brought was traditional and authentic, clearly chosen with care by whoever was organizing the church function. She laid it out piece by piece, explaining what each component was called and how it would be worn. The base layer was a simple black tunic, a long religious garment with a loose, modest silhouette that would extend all the way to my ankles. Next came the white coif, a close-fitting cap that covered my hair completely. The black veil came last, draped over the coif and wimple, falling smoothly over my shoulders and down my back. The heels weren't dramatic, maybe 2 inches tall, with a modest, practical design appropriate for someone in religious service. Nancy and Turner both stepped back, giving me their full assessment. I saw something change in their expressions, a kind of surprised recognition. Turner's eyes widened slightly, and Nancy actually smiled despite her illness. "Charles," Nancy said softly, "you look perfect. You look exactly like a young nun. I don't think anyone would question it for a second." Nancy led me to the full-length mirror in my bedroom, and what I saw there stopped me in my tracks completely. I had expected to see myself in costume, Charles dressed up, playing a role. What I saw instead was a transformation so complete it took my breath away. The person in the mirror was a young woman, a novice nun with a calm, serene expression. The habit concealed everything. The loose silhouette hid my shoulders, my frame, any indication of my body shape. The coif and wimple framed a face that the minimal makeup had softened, bringing out features I'd never noticed before. The veil added an air of mystery, of devotion, of quiet dedication to something greater than oneself. I turned slowly, watching the fabric move with me, seeing how the habit flowed and swayed. The heels changed my posture, making me stand straighter, more upright, shifting my center of gravity in a way that affected how I moved. My walk was more careful, more measured, each step deliberate and controlled. There was something peaceful about it, something right. The modest clothing, the covered head, the simple dignity of the whole presentation. It felt like putting on a new skin that somehow fit better than I expected. Not perfectly, not without questions or confusion, but better. Different. Meaningful in ways I couldn't quite articulate. "Charles?" Nancy's voice broke through my thoughts. "Are you okay? We need to get going soon." I pulled my gaze away from the mirror, turning to face my friends. Both of them were watching me with concern, probably wondering if I was having second thoughts, if I was going to back out of our plan. "I'm fine," I said, and realized I meant it. "I'm ready, let's do this." The strangest part was that I wasn't lying. Despite the bizarreness of the situation, despite the fact that I was about to walk into a church meeting dressed as a nun, despite everything that made this seem like a terrible idea, I felt ready. More than that, I felt curious. I wanted to see what would happen, wanted to experience this, wanted to step through this open door and see what was on the other side. Nancy had called an Uber for me, not wanting to risk me walking the few blocks to church in case someone from the neighborhood saw and asked questions. The ride was brief, maybe 10 minutes, but it felt like an eternity. I sat in the back seat, acutely aware of every aspect of my appearance, certain the driver would see through the disguise immediately. But he didn't. He barely glanced at me, just confirmed the destination, and drove. When he wished me a good evening as I got out, he said, "Have a blessed evening, sister," in a tone that suggested he saw nothing unusual at all. That was my first real-world confirmation that this disguise actually worked. I wasn't just fooling my friends in the controlled environment of my bedroom. I was reading to others as exactly what I appeared to be, a young nun heading to church. The meeting was being held in the church's community center, a building adjacent to the main worship hall. I could see other participants arriving, about a dozen women of various ages, all there to be fitted for their habits and receive instructions. My heart was pounding as I approached the entrance, every instinct screaming at me to turn around, to run, to abandon this crazy plan. But I thought of Nancy. sick at home, desperate not to lose this opportunity. I thought of the trust she'd placed in me, the faith that I could pull this off. And I thought of Turner's calm certainty that I could do this. I took a deep breath, straightened my shoulders, and walked through the door. The community center was set up with several stations. One area had racks of habits in different sizes, where a team of church volunteers was doing measurements and fittings. Another section had chairs arranged in rows, where Sister Margaret, one of the older nuns from our church, was going over the order of procession. A third area had refreshments, coffee, and cookies for participants. I signed in using Nancy's name, my hand shaking slightly as I wrote in the registration book. The volunteer at the desk, Mrs. Patterson, whom I'd known my entire life, looked right at me and smiled warmly without a flicker of recognition. "Nancy dear, we're so glad you could make it," she said. "Head over to the fitting area first, and then join the group for instructions." I nodded, not trusting my voice, and moved toward the fitting station. This was the most dangerous part, I realized. Close proximity to other people, potential for conversation, chances for someone to notice something off about me. The volunteer managing the fittings was a woman I didn't recognize, probably from one of the other parishes in our district. She had me stand on a small platform while she checked the length of my habit, made sure the fit was appropriate, adjusted the veil. "Perfect," she murmured, making a note on her clipboard. "You're all set. Beautiful habit, very becoming. Head over to Sister Margaret for the instructions portion." I moved to the seating area, choosing a chair toward the back, hoping to remain inconspicuous. More participants filed in, and I kept my eyes down, my expression serene and calm, channeling every image I'd ever seen of peaceful, devoted nuns. Sister Margaret began the instruction session, explaining the history of the ceremony, the significance of the nun's habit, the order in which we'd process down the aisle. The close call came during the refreshment break. This was the moment everything could fall apart. I was standing near the coffee table, trying to decide if drinking something would require me to speak and potentially reveal my voice, when someone I knew approached me. Jessica Morrison, a girl from my school who also attended our church. She was 2 years older than me, a regular in the young adults ministry, and she'd known me since we were kids. "Hi," she said, smiling. "I don't think we've met. Are you new to the parish?" My heart stopped. Jessica was looking right at me, close enough to touch, and she didn't recognize me at all. Not even a hint of uncertainty in her expression. I was a complete stranger to her. I smiled gently, shook my head, and then pointed to my throat and shook my head again, hoping she'd interpret this as me having lost my voice or being unable to speak. "Oh, you can't talk?" she said sympathetically. "That's okay. I'm Jessica. It's nice to meet you anyway. You look very peaceful in your habit. Some people look uncomfortable in traditional clothing like this, but you seem really comfortable." She chatted for another minute about the upcoming ceremony, and I continued to nod and smile, using gesture and expression to communicate without words. When she finally moved on to talk to someone else, I felt my knees go weak with relief. That had been too close, but I'd navigated it successfully, using my newly discovered ability to project this feminine calm, this serene presence that seemed to come naturally when I inhabited this role. It was like accessing a part of myself I'd never known existed, a way of being in the world that felt foreign and familiar all at once. The meeting lasted about 90 minutes total. By the end, I'd been measured, instructed, rehearsed, and fully integrated into the group of participants. I had Nancy's spot secured. The mission was a success. As I waited for the Uber to pick me up, standing outside the community center in the cool evening air, I felt something I hadn't expected. Not relief that it was over, though there was certainly some of that. What I felt most strongly was a strange sense of loss, of something ending too soon. I'd been nervous and scared throughout the meeting, yes, but I'd also felt something else. Something peaceful. Something right. That night, after I'd returned home and changed back into my regular clothes, after Nancy had called to thank me profusely and Turner had congratulated me on pulling it off, I found myself alone with my thoughts. The makeup was washed off, the habit carefully folded and returned to Nancy's bag, the heels set aside. I was just Charles again, regular teenage boy in jeans and a t-shirt. But something fundamental had shifted. I couldn't quite name it, couldn't fully articulate what I was feeling, but I knew with absolute certainty that I wasn't the same person I'd been that morning. I kept thinking about the mirror moment, that instant when I'd seen myself transformed. The peaceful young woman in the habit, calm and serene and somehow more authentic than I'd expected. I kept thinking about Mrs. Patterson telling me I had a lovely, peaceful presence. About Jessica looking right at me without recognition. About the volunteer saying the habit was becoming on me. There was something profound in that. Something that resonated in places inside me I'd never explored before. In the weeks and months that followed, I found myself thinking constantly about those experiences, about what they meant for my understanding of myself. I didn't immediately start wearing dresses or makeup in my everyday life. I didn't make any dramatic announcements or sudden changes to my presentation, but internally something fundamental had shifted. I wasn't sure yet where I fit in all of this. Maybe I was somewhere on that spectrum, or maybe I was simply someone who discovered they enjoyed accessing their feminine side sometimes while still identifying as male most of the time. The labels mattered less than the fundamental truth I'd discovered. I was more complex than I'd realized, more multifaceted, more beautifully complicated. The experience taught me that identity is not fixed or simple. We are all works in progress, constantly discovering new aspects of ourselves, constantly growing and changing and evolving. What I thought I knew about myself at 17 was just the beginning, just the surface of a much deeper truth. And perhaps most importantly, I learned that there is beauty in complexity, joy in exploration, and profound peace in allowing yourself to be authentically who you are, whatever that means, however that manifests. This story isn't over. In many ways, it's just beginning. I'm 17 years old, standing at the threshold of adulthood, with so much still to discover about myself and the world. But I'm standing here with more self-knowledge than I had before, with more authenticity, with more courage to be exactly who I am, whoever that turns out to be. Have you ever discovered a part of yourself when you least expected it? If my story resonated with you, please like and subscribe. I'd love to hear about your own experiences. Leave a comment below sharing your thoughts, your questions, or your own story of self-discovery. Remember, the most important relationship you'll ever have is the one with yourself. Make it a truthful one. Make it a compassionate one. Make it one where you honor all the different parts of who you are, even the parts that surprise you, even the parts that don't fit the narrative you thought you were writing. Thank you for listening. Thank you for being part of this journey. Until next time, be brave, be authentic, and be kind to yourself. You deserve nothing less. The end.
The Gender Diary exists to light that path with shared stories. Whether you found connection in this narrative, you're on your own journey of gender exploration, or you're here seeking understanding, your subscription fuels our mission. Every subscriber empowers us to keep illuminating these authentic experiences for our community. Kindly drop a comment below. Your voice adds to the tapestry of experiences that makes this space meaningful. Until our next story unfolds.